I used to think peace was measured by silence, by the sound of the wind rustling through the oaks and the crickets at dusk. For years, that quiet stretch of land was my refuge. Until one morning, the peace was shattered. The sound came first, low, mechanical, relentless. Then came the tremor beneath my feet. I stepped out of my cabin and saw dust clouds rising over the ridge, bulldozers, excavators, and bright orange survey flags, staked in neat rows across the field I'd grown up. Walking every day, I thought it had to be a mistake. No one had called me, no one had sent a notice, but when I drove down the hill and saw the sign, my heart froze. The reserve at Pine Creek, a premier HOA community. Phase 1, construction in progress. It was my land, the very same 40 acres my grandfather had left me, untouched for decades. When I confronted the workers, they told me they were under contract with the Pine Creek Homeowners Association. They waved blueprints and permits like Holy Scripture. And when I called the HOA office, the man who answered, Greg Thorne, their president, laughed. "Sir, that parcel's been annexed for years. You might want to check your records before making false claims." But I had checked, and I knew one thing. They were building on ground that wasn't theirs. I could have stopped them that day. I could have called the sheriff, filed an injunction, raised hell, but instead, I decided to wait. Because revenge, when done right, doesn't rush. It breathes, it plans, it watches. So I watched them build every nail, every fence, every home, knowing the day would come when I'd walk into court with one piece of paper that would tear their world apart. My name is Daniel Reeves, and Pine Creek has been in my family since 1962. My grandfather, a stubborn man with calloused hands and an engineer's precision, bought the land when the town was little more than a post office and a single diner. He used to say, "Land doesn't shout for attention, Danny, it just waits. It outlasts fools." I never realized how right he was until now. For decades, that land was a kind of family heirloom, rolling pasture, a slow-moving creek, and a small farmhouse I'd restored myself. After my parents passed, I moved back from the city, looking for something quieter, something simpler. At first, Pine Creek felt like peace, but over the years, I'd noticed how things changed. New developments popped up like weeds. Cookie-cutter homes, asphalt, HOAs, the kind of managed perfection that drained the soul from a place. The reserve was the newest one, an HOA promising modern living with timeless values. But no one told me that timeless apparently meant trespassing. When I drove into their office that first week to question the construction, the receptionist looked at me like I was the intruder. Greg Thorne walked out moments later, tall, confident, the kind of man who smiled without warmth. "Mr. Reeves," he said, "we've reviewed your concerns. The property in question is part of the reserve's expansion, annexed by the city in 2003. Funny, I said, because I've paid property taxes on it every year since 1992. He chuckled, eyes narrowing. "Well, paperwork can be messy. I'd advise you to verify with the county clerk." He was daring me to chase my tail, a tactic of arrogance. I left his office calm, but my stomach burned. The next morning, I visited the county records department. I waited nearly 3 hours before a clerk brought me a box of old files, handwritten maps, typewritten deeds, and sealed transfers. And there it was, Reeves Family Holdings, Parcel 7B, boundaries clear as day, stamped, signed, and still active. When I asked if anyone had ever filed a transfer, she shook her head. "No, sir. No subdivision, no sale. You're the sole owner." I thanked her, took a copy, and called Greg's office. He didn't pick up. That evening, a notice appeared on my gate, a printed letter from the HOA citing me for unauthorized occupation of restricted land. They fined me $200. I laughed so hard it hurt. That's when I realized this wasn't ignorance. It was intentional. They knew they'd overstepped. They were bluffing, hoping I'd fold under bureaucracy. They didn't know me very well. I decided to let the game play out. For months, I lived on a construction site. The once quiet pasture became a hive of activity. Concrete trucks, contractors, architects. They leveled hills, dug foundations, and installed power lines. I'd sit on my porch with a cup of coffee and watch. Sometimes workers would wave. Most ignored me. One asked once, "You moving out soon?" I just smiled. The HOA sent more letters. Violations, citations, and absurd fines. Failure to maintain lawn aesthetics. Unauthorized livestock presence. Apparently, my grandfather's barn and 3 chickens were now aesthetic threats. I kept every letter, dated and filed. Evidence. The more they built, the bolder Greg became. He visited one day, leaning against his black SUV, sunglasses on, arms crossed. "Daniel, look, I get it. This must be frustrating, but this land's part of the reserve now. You can't just squat here?" I stared at the rows of nearly finished homes behind him. "Tell me something, Greg. You ever verify a land deed before building?" He smirked. "That's above my pay grade." I turned back toward my porch. "Good. Then it's not your name that'll end up in the lawsuit." He didn't smile after that. By midsummer, 96 homes stood tall, painted beige, lined with fences, and crowned with HOA pride. They hosted open houses. Realtors gushed about prime real estate in Pine Creek's most desirable desirable community. But behind the scenes, cracks were forming. The developers started getting letters, subtle queries from the county clerk's office about discrepancies in land registration. One evening, I got a call from Franklin, my lawyer. "They're getting nervous," he said. "We'll let them finish phase 1. When they announce full occupancy, that's when we strike." It was poetic, really. Let them build their illusion to completion, and then take it all. By fall, the first families moved in. Perfect smiles, perfect lawns, perfect ignorance. Some waved politely, others whispered. Word had spread that I was the troublemaker living on HOA land. I didn't correct them, I let them talk. Then came the final straw, a certified letter titled Eviction Notice. The HOA demanded I vacate my unauthorized dwelling within 30 days. Franklin grinned when he read it. "That's your trigger. We file Monday," and we did. The lawsuit landed like a bombshell. Reeves v. Pine Creek HOA. It claimed unlawful development, trespass, and property theft. Attached were 60 years of deeds, maps, and tax receipts. Greg's arrogance turned to panic. The courtroom buzzed with whispers. HOA members packed the benches, their polished smiles dimmed by tension. Greg sat at the defense table, jaw tight. The judge, an older man with silver glasses, scanned the case summary. "Mr. Thorne," he said, "you're asserting your HOA built on land not owned by the plaintiff?" Greg's lawyer stammered, "Your Honor, the development was approved by the city. All documents were reviewed." "Show me the title transfer," the judge interrupted. There wasn't one. Franklin stood, calm as ever. He approached the bench and handed over a weathered manila folder. "Your Honor, this is the original deed to the property dated 1962. No transfers. No annexation. The county assessor confirms ongoing ownership under my client, Daniel Reeves." The silence was crushing. Greg's face drained of color. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw fear. The judge closed the folder and nodded slowly. "Then this case is not a matter of dispute. It's a matter of record." He raised his gavel. "All land currently occupied by the Reserve HOA, including its 96 homes, is legally owned by Mr. Reeves. Court is adjourned." The gavel struck, and in that single moment, everything they'd built crumbled. After the ruling, the news spread like wildfire. HOA builds on wrong land. Homeowners panicked. Reporters showed up at my gate, cameras flashing. Greg resigned within a week. Lawsuits piled up against him and the developers. Homeowners pleaded with me not to evict them. I didn't want to destroy lives, just reclaim what was mine. So I offered them a choice: pay a fair lease or relocate. Most stayed. Within months, the HOA dissolved. The signs came down. The rules vanished, and slowly, the place started to breathe again. Children played on lawns without warnings. Neighbors actually talked. The fear that had governed them for years evaporated. Sometimes I'd walk the ridge at sunset, the same view my grandfather once had. I'd think of his words, "Land outlasts fools." He was right. The land was still here, so was I. But the people who tried to claim it, their empire had fallen not by force, but by the weight of their own arrogance.